Are your teams equipped to navigate the pace of change and uncertainty and disruption they're being asked to carry? If you lead people, strategy, or performance, you may be feeling a certain type of pressure these days. Expectations are rising, technology is changing, how work gets done, margins are tighter, talent is harder to retain, and old business assumptions may no longer hold. The question is no longer just, do we have the right strategy? The question is, do we have leaders equipped to help adapt, communicate, innovate, and perform through uncertainty? Before teams can perform differently, they often have to think differently. They have to examine the mindsets, assumptions, and patterns shaping how they respond to change and new business challenges. And if the world around us is changing this quickly, shouldn't we also be willing to challenge our own conventional thinking to meet the moment?
And this is where organizations truly start to feel the strain. Leadership capacity is now the new competitive advantage. And what I mean by that is 20 years ago, companies competed primarily on product and strategy. But today's products are copied quickly. In 5 minutes, you can have the same replica of the exact same product. So technology is accessible to everyone. The differentiator is how fast leaders can help people learn, adapt, innovate, and execute.
So my name is Terry Arvizu Gonzalez. Welcome to the TAG Collab. I've spent more than 2 decades leading teams and working at the intersection of media, communication, culture, and organizational change. I'm joined today by my partner in crime, Edna Uribe. Introduce
Edna
yourself.
Uribe. Yeah, so I've led large teams in very complex environments and operations across media, sales, content, leadership environments. So I've had my share of front row center, firsthand observations of how much business performance depends on the leaders carrying the work.
So many of you may be asking, what are these 2 people doing together? Well, we have a little announcement, which is that we are extending what the TAG Collab does, and we are now offering executive leadership experiences and consulting to help organizations build leadership capacity that is required for this moment of growth, of change, disruption, and rising performance pressure. So today, though, we are going to have a conversation like so many, Edna, that we've had through the years working together about the needs of leaders today and what the business, right? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to business requires for the moment. So, you said something at the beginning about the change, right? Something has changed. What, in your opinion, has changed over the last couple of years that changes the way we have to think about how we do business and also how we equip or hire the right people or train the right people for the moment?
I think it's very complex to think of it as a one thing happening. There's a couple of factors, right? And we all know technology keeps changing. And as I alluded before, products are no longer king, right? Where we used to have industries that had pure focus on developing new products, now, because of technology and how quickly it changes, the real challenges that we're seeing is more in the sense of change fatigue. It's actually something real that we have to address. Employees are overwhelmed by competing priorities because the industry continues to evolve. Leaders, for example, are now having to become translators of complexity. And that is very difficult to do, especially when your capacity is pretty limited, right? And so instead of building a product, you're replacing it with almost like complex solving situations and human skills. So I feel there's a lot to unpack on this conversation. So at the end of the day, it's really about awareness and being nimble in an environment that will continue to change. It's not a beginning and an end. It's the it's that it's happening and it will continue to happen.
Right. So in some ways, we're going from being kind of like specialists to being just constant problem solvers in a world that is ever is evolving and changing in real time, and that what needs to change is the internal, right? Coding and the way that we are sort of coded, like I say, to deal with that in order to really come up to the challenge, the performance challenges or the business challenges that we need. I mean, you've run $60 million P&Ls. You know exactly what are the consequences of people who are not equipped to keep up with the changing pace of technology and business needs that we're seeing, and that feels like, I do feel like there has been an acceleration in the last couple of years with AI is sort of making us, it feels like the rapid change of that technology was enforcing on us is happening faster and faster than it was in the past, right? It keeps getting faster and faster. So for you, what are the business, because this is not just a human soft skills thing. This is a real business imperative, and it has real consequences on the business when you don't have the right folks with the right mindset and you're not going to be hiring constantly over and over again the wrong people, right? You know what I mean? So can you walk us through a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting, right? Like with technology and how AI actually intensifies the pressure. What happens in a team is that you have many priorities, and as new shiny objects appear, your focus becomes to try to grab them all. And as a leader, instead of going one way, you're trying to push your team to do many things all at the same time. So your efficiency actually diminishes and your productivity diminishes as well. And that's something that we don't do it intentionally. Even corporate, when brings down different priorities, they're not intentionally doing this. It's just that they're responding. So we're constantly in a responsive state of mind versus a proactive state of mind. And it's really about taking a step back, right? And really challenging that conventional thinking and more than anything, examine, right? Like, so clear example for us, right? We come from broadcast. And so for many, many years, we did linear selling. And by linear, I mean spots and dots, commercial selling. That's what we did. And then digital came over. So now it's like, well, add on digital. But then there's streaming. And by the time we woke up, like not only streaming was in there, behavioral targeting was already there. And I don't know that we were completely equipped. And as much technology as you can bring in, our capacity to position the product was lagging because there were too many priorities at once, right? Like, so in that sense, this is what I meant by fatigue, right? And why leaders are actually um, not unwilling, but need to be capable of refocusing and understanding what is this more. It's not what this is more of, like what it requires from me as a leader, and how can I actually put everybody together to come up with new solutions, right? And how do we come up with a culture, right, that encourages people to think differently without letting go of what they already know? Because see, when you are asking people to behave differently, it's a threat. And so as leaders, whereas before you could be expert in the product that you were selling, now you have to be expert in the people that you're leading to get uh, to those goals. And that in itself is a shift in mindset. And that's where I think the balancing of technology and AI could be actually beneficial if we understand that that is the ask and not
Yeah.
necessarily something that is happening to us, but something that we can actually leverage to our advantage.
I think that's a great point. You said a lot of things that if we can, I'd like to spend a little bit of time unpacking. One of the things you mentioned was we were in an industry, right, that began as broadcasting as television, right? And in some cases, radio. And so what we started to do, it's like building a house and having more add-ons and additions and additions and additions. And because of the pace of all these pressures that I mentioned to continue performing, you're in that sort of rat race where you're not taking the moment to step back and say, if I was creating this for the first time ever, what is the job to be done, right? This is one of the things in innovation that comes up a lot is Most people will just take the house and keep putting additions and addition, and that's where your employees are really overwhelmed because they have to do what they did yesterday and now all the 200 other things that we think could be potentially setting us up for the future. Where innovation, when you think differently, like an innovator and sort of a beginner's mindset, which is one of the things that we teach, is you ask yourself, you take a step back and if you could have everybody in the company doing this is where you can unlock real innovation and create a culture of innovation where they're stepping back and saying, if I was building this for the first time, would I still be doing these things? That's number one, right? Would I be, what is the job to be done? And then the second thing I wanted to sort of focus on is that's very easy said than done. You know, in Spanish we say de la boca para afuera, right? That's so easy to do. No, because what we also teach is not just the external, but the internal too. There is a real, and I want you to chime in on this with me because I know we talk about this all the time, which is that internal work that has to happen for a person to be open to this type of culture of innovation and of constant almost learning and unlearning, changing, right, in real time, is understanding the inside. Understanding yourself from the inside out starts before you can even have one of those cultures, right? You can have a lot of people who talk a lot about innovation, but they don't practice it. You know why? Because they are so tied to their identity or the things that they knew how to do before, or their comfort zone, for example, that they're unable to overcome that in order to really deliver on that innovation that we're talking about. So, yeah, I invite you to come in and talk about how we've talked about and how we address this to teach other folks to think this way.
Yeah, I think in terms of perspective, or maybe gaining a little bit of perspective, kind of the things that we always talk about is going from a doer to a driver, right? And then that's kind of like one of our key topics. And that's fundamentally one of the principles of first time managers or middle managers uh, that actually gets in their way of just growth alone. Now, compound that with all the changes in the industry that is happening now, and you have a recipe for disaster if you haven't taken a step back and addressed the inner side of it. So, to give you a little bit of an idea, right? Like leaders today can no longer rely on what made them successful 5 years ago, whereas before we could. Like in broadcast for at least 50 years, if we were experts in positioning television, programming news, local news, if we were experts on it, we had at least 5 to 10 year bandwidth to update our knowledge in that industry. It no longer exists. It's changing on a daily basis. So the industries, as they continue to change quickly, imagine this, right? Like you are a manager that was really good at what you used to do, and now you got promoted for what you used to do really well that is also irrelevant, right? And so it's a double whammy for leaders right now, right? So what's happening now is that the best leaders and the ones that are actually rising to the top become perpetual learners. So it's no longer about expertise, it's about less of a being an expert and more of a learner, right? And so one of the things that I feel we don't really talk enough is how to leverage that curiosity as a leadership competency. Or like humility, for example, in leadership has to be addressed as well. Continuous learning cultures need to be developed. And quite frankly, even letting go of outdated assumptions is key to forming that. So I guess it's always going back to the basics of what took you here won't take you there. And really acknowledging that also what took you here, it's kind of irrelevant because the industry changed. And this is not just on media, by the way. This is everywhere, right? Like automotive industry is going through the exact same change, right? Like you might have been a great engineer back then. Well, with new technology and where the industry is moving, you have to update that. And if you're actually trying to update your own learning and managing a team, that's where the fatigue really comes from.
Yeah.
Not even adding the layers of where all the other priorities are coming down on you. So this is why it's so important to take a step back, right? And really go in and be self-aware first before we actually take a step forward.
Yeah, I want to talk about, when we talk about basics, the last executive retreat that we just or executive experience that we did, one of the things we got feedback on was going back to basics. And I love to use the term double click and triple click, like go all the way until it gets you to the root cause. And so part of the fatigue that we're talking about is happening because of the way that our brains are coded, right? Like the moment those who've seen the Tag Collab before know that I love to talk about and understanding the why we operate in certain ways. And here's where humility comes in, right? And extreme self-awareness is sometimes the way we operate helps us survive and stay alive, but sometimes it doesn't help us thrive, right? And so take, for example, that manager that you're talking about. Under enormous amount of pressure, stress, their brain is already, number one, we know that when your brain is perceives stress, whether it's a bear chasing you in the woods or corporate driving you crazy to deliver those results, your brain sees both of them the same way. And what it does, it says, I'm in danger, I need to shut off, right? And so the fact that people are feeling as overwhelmed as they are today about the business pressures, just in general, because I even feel like we're overstimulated with the telephone too much. People are in a stress environment. Understanding that that state of mind is not always the one that allows you to implement your executive functioning, right? Which is the part that makes you a great leader, the part that says, let me take a step back and see, why are we doing what we're doing? What was the first intended purpose of this, right? And being able to have that sort of being centered and peace and that humility to shed what no longer is valuable to ourselves anymore, it requires a lot of training. Like, kudos to the person that can do this naturally. I can tell you that I have spent 20 years working on this work in progress and I'm still not there. And my master's degree was, as I say, a master's of science in management and leadership, but it was honestly a great self-help course, right? Where I could discern and sort of implement that state of mind, bring it back. And that's one of the things, Edna, that I'd love for you to share how we do that, how we bring people back to sort of that basic connection, give it an explanation to then be able to like discern, right? Okay, this automatic behavior is either working for me or it's working against me.
Right. So pressure, right, like as you're talking about, has always existed. And the difference is the intensity and the frequency, right, that is happening. So you as a leader are expected to absorb stress while helping others stay focused, right? So emotional regulation now has become an actual business skill, right? A leader's emotional state is contagious. Calm is the new strategic advantage. And the way that we do this, right, is really understanding the neuroscience behind it. And that's something that you and I do very well because of the other collaborations that we have and how we've been able to break it down even for middle school girls to understand, right? Like what's happening with your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. So at the end of the day, is understanding how to pause, right? And how to take that step back, how to actually make space for you to bring that calmness because it is contagious, right? And it's one of the examples that I always use when I'm talking to people is when you look at my face and I'm very focused, I look like I'm mad. I am angry and people fear me. And I don't see myself in the mirror. So I wish I had a mirror to like constantly remind me like smile. But what's funny is I've had people when I'm walking down the street tell me smile. Like why are you so mad? And so what you don't realize is that that energy is what you're transmitting to your team. And now more than ever, because we are in this constant state of pressure, people are looking for those inherited signals that are coming from their leaders, right? And so that emotional awareness is key and is functional. And I believe, and this is just my theory, right? It's not actually proven, but I believe that as we continue to evolve with AI and with technology and with tools, that emotional regulation will be the basic business skill that every leader will have to develop.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that there's any other way to
You know what I want to, I like that you said that. I really love the fact that we're framing this in within the business perspective, right? Because so often when you look at leadership training, people think, oh yeah, you know, the CFO is saying, but what, how does that get back to the bottom line, right? Or your CEO. It, you know, it is the argument that we make, and part of our methodology is that by allowing people to do that emotional regulation, it's what opens the door to have a heightened state of executive functioning. This is the person that is going to be able to say, wait a second, there's some super complicated procedure that has just built up over time, and it's a waste of time and it's not efficient, right? And that person who is in that centered, calm state, emotionally regulated, can identify more easily than somebody who has not done any of this work. Hold on a second. Why are we doing this? What was this intention? What was the initial reason we started this? Are we actually performing the job that needs to be done? That can unlock, by the way, a bunch of different new revenue streams, right? If like, and I'll give you an example. In television, I studied broadcast journalism. I thought it was broadcast journalism. A professor at Northwestern one day asked me, said, what is the business that you're in? And I said to him, this was like before, right around the time that Twitter and social media was just being invented and pushed out to the market. And I said, well, I'm in the business of television. He says, no, you're not. You're in the business of attention and of information. And it made me think, okay, hold on a second. It challenged my conventional thinking, which was I thought I worked in television. It turns out it was only the medium. It wasn't the actual business I was in. The moment I could unlock that and say, what is the job to be done? My job is to inform, and my job is to entertain, right? And capture people's attention. Now, all of a sudden, I see possibilities everywhere, because that's where we started doing, like, for example, radio, Edna, we started doing events. Because it wasn't just, you weren't just tied to the radio as an industry, it was about entertaining people. And you can do that in person too, right? Entertaining them through music. That's where the argument for this type of like leadership training, I think is important, is that people kind of put it on the, oh, that's a nice to have, when in reality, it's a core imperative, I think, to the business now, so that these are folks who are in a mental condition that allows them to be efficient, innovate, and when you are doing that, then you're obviously, if you're doing that right, then you're making more money, and you are sort of rising up to those challenges I mentioned at the beginning, those performance pressures, instead of just doing the same thing constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring in a really, really good point in terms of the adaptability of being a leader, right? In an environment, innovation and what it means today versus what it meant 5 years or 10 years ago, right? And at the end of the day, for a company, which for any company to survive, you need to produce results, right? And so ultimately, you need leaders that influence, right? Because expertise in itself, now it's going to rely more on your human skills versus the product skills, which is what we've been talking about, right? Like, and so strong leadership is not a luxury, right? It's an infrastructure that you have to build in. And that infrastructure involves training people, right? Making this an environment of learning. I remember even when I had my teams, we used to say this, like, our environment is about learning, is about understanding what is happening around us. I think what makes it so magical working in an industry like media is that you really are at the forefront of trends. Before they even happen in culture, we're already covering them. We're already living them. We live 6 to a year out, right? And so we had that advantage of understanding this is coming, right? And you have to be aware because your life depends on it. And so, okay, the life of the business I'm talking,
Right.
right? And so,
Well, but
in that
your
sense,
well-being and taking care of your family does too, if you're making money off of that. So you're absolutely right.
well, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and I know that I mean, this would be like a topic that we have to table for another occasion. That whole life balance and what that means today, right? And like, there's a lot of opportunities to explore, because there are ways to have balance without having to give up your dreams, your career, your professional aspirations. Nevertheless, when you are in front of a team and you need to deliver, the pressure that you're under requires a different set of skills. And that's what we're sort of really diving into today, right? It's really understanding that what really truly matters at the end of the day is that emotional regulation, and really understanding that, and I'm going to repeat it again, I think is the third time I bring it up, it's a business imperative.
Yeah.
If you want good product, you need to have the good leader behind it that is actually influencing your team. It's no longer producing for the sake of a product, is actually producing results because this leader influenced the rest of the team that actually got you to those results. And so that's where training really comes in place. And that's where conversations that you and I have with mid-level managers, which is really where the change happens, truly matter, because they're the ones that are really receiving both ends, right? Like they're receiving the top leadership priorities, and then they're also managing the people in the front lines, dealing with all the issues that happen when you're out on the field, and really like getting all the feedback from the market itself. You need a lot more than just knowing the product you're positioning. You need a lot more skills and a lot more discernment, to your point, than what you knew 5 years ago.
Yeah, I want to take a step back because going again back to basics, like, we talk about leadership training, and I know that for those of us who haven't been in this space for a long time, you kind of wonder, you hear it, the skepticism, right? Like, wait, why do we need this? Okay. Um, you know, so in 2006 was, I think I've said this story, but I'll just say it again. I was getting my degree, and I remember they were talking about, like, oh my gosh, the diploma, do we keep it as a Master's of Science in Management, or do we make it a Master's of Science in Leadership? And at the time I thought, my God, please do not put on my diploma a Master's of Science in Leadership, because nobody understood that, right? We were thinking, I thought they're gonna think it's like Masters of Science in Mickey Mouse. And what I learned there, and why we've seen this pick up the need for this even more and more and more, is that when we didn't have technology being as quick as it is now, right, where these major shifts in generation took one generation, maybe even two generations. When you think about the agricultural, right, era to the information era, you're talking about 2 or 3 generations there. So there's enough time to change even that upper echelon. With technology, when you think about it, it took us millions of years to make, I don't know, millions or thousands, but to make a television set. And it's only taken us about 15 to make the iPhone after the television, right, was created. And those cycles and those loops are getting faster and faster and faster. So where before in management you used to have very hierarchical, like, somebody at the top, and they made all the decisions. They looked out for the horizon. They looked out for opportunity. They had that mindset that we're talking about, right, Edna, of looking out and being that decision maker. They could afford to do that. With technology making those loops go faster and faster and faster, many organizations found themselves that they needed to flatten the organization more and build more leadership. They couldn't wait until somebody was 74 years old and had lived, right, to make the best decisions, to get all of us to that point. So that's where, you and I were the beneficiaries of that. You began to see a trend where a lot of companies were saying, we need to start identifying who are our high performers and then bring them in and accelerate that learning. Yes, there is no doubt that the 74-year-old has a ton of experience that life gives you that cannot compete with a 24-year-old. But if we were to compete globally and continue, to compete in business, we needed to be able to equip and accelerate the learning of people that were lower in the organization, because if not, we're going to go out of business, right? If the old guy or the old woman at the top is the only one making decisions. What I'm seeing is that in the last, I would say 3 years with AI and things ramping up, what used to never be possible is happening from what before, like it took years. We used to do our live shots with a truck and a cameraman and an audio guy, and they had to come back from the satellite. Now what's possible is a question of sometimes days. From one day to another, they just invented the iPhone, and now you can go live from there. And what we do on AI today that the AI can't do, in a week you go back and it actually can do it, right? So those cycles are going faster and faster and faster, and the human mind isn't equipped for that type of change unless you're intentional about it. And that's what we teach, right? Is that going to the why are you maybe reacting to change. Change management has always been something very difficult at companies regardless, okay? But now that change is happening more and more and more. So the world is not going to change. We have to change internally to be able to be equipped to rise to those challenges at that speed and pace that is required. This is what we are teaching people, is we had to do it. Our industry was one of the first that was disrupted. When you look at AI right now, graphic artists, content creation, writing, marketing, those are all the things that AI can do now today. So you and I were sitting front and center on this disruption. And I think the pain we went through deserves to be shared. Not to say anything bad, but how did we lessen our pain? This is some of what we're offering, right, through the Tag Collab executive leadership experiences.
Yeah, and I mean to the point that you're making, it's that pressure, right? That constant pressure that you feel when change continues to be your norm, and when it's accelerated, it's even more imperative to understand what is it require for you to succeed and for your team to succeed, right? And so one of the things that we observed from our latest leadership experience that we had is that that's exactly what they were asking, right? Like they were asking and they were commenting on the need to have space to reflect, to understand their patterns, really to build that shared language among themselves to say, hey, these are the tools we need to practice and we can apply them immediately, right? Because it is changing so fast, I cannot give you a book for you to read and implement whenever you have time. No. We need to design, or we needed to design a format that actually addresses what's happening and something that they can actually take as a framework and apply immediately, next day, to their teams and see a result right away. So that's the experience that we're creating. And I am so happy to see the feedback from them to say, I really needed this. I needed a space to just reflect. I needed a space for myself. And I needed to understand that the patterns and the challenges that I'm seeing are normal, that it is not just me, that this is something that is happening to everyone.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something that we offer that it's so needed.
I love that you use, because I wanted to make sure that we said this word, is how we normalize human behavior, instinctual human behavior, right? At one part we talk about the brain and how the brain works and what we've explained before. It's like, welcome to the human race. This is normal. It's just what we were in. Our brains are still a little bit in the caveman era, right? We prefer, our brains are equipped to keep us alive and breathing. That's great, but that kind of limits you a little bit in this time of so much change and adoption, right? Just like in the same way, and that I often tell people, please, let's admit that we are tribal, right? When the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion came up, a lot of people, no, I'm not, I'm super diverse. No, we are tribal by nature. Our brains are wired that way. We want to be around people that are like ourselves. That's one of the first things you study in management, is you are going to have the natural instinct to want to hire people that are like you because it makes you feel comfortable. The question is that the best for the business? No, it's not. Because then you have groupthink, you don't have any diversity of opinions, whether it's, age, socioeconomic, and taking just for example, US economics, our country is becoming more and more diverse, right? So you need to have a reflection of that in your rooms, because technically you sell to those people, right? You want to make money from, so you have to understand that community, who it is. So my point in all of this is that I don't judge the fact that we are tribal by nature, just like I don't judge the fact that the person who is being asked to perform in huge uncertainty is going to feel an enormous amount of discomfort. And their brain is going to tell them, don't do it. Stay with what you used to know how to do, because that made you successful. Your brain, in many ways, is kind of, ¿cómo se dice en español? Traicionándote, like betraying you.
Betraying you.
Because it's still, though our brains have not adapted to this world. So yes, it's going to keep you alive and breathing, but it may not make your business the most successful and adaptable and resilient in these times, right? So it's important, I think, that's why I love the science behind it, because it says, I'm normal. This is normal. This is going to happen. Now the question is, pausing and taking the time to figure out, is this something that's working for me or against me? In the caveman era, we lived in tribes. It wasn't encouraged for you to mix the tribes because you could be exposed to illnesses you were not immune to, right? And so it killed your whole tribe. Okay, we don't live in the news break. We do not live in the caveman era anymore. And today, going outside that circle and creating more diversity is actually what's going to help you understand opportunities in the moment even more, so that you can not just survive in your business, but thrive in your business or thrive in your own career.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. It's not just diversity for the sake of bringing different perspectives. It is a survival imperative, but you have to pair it, right, with curiosity. So it's diverse perspectives from just different vantage points, people that are very experienced. Like we're talking about how that product knowledge from 5 years ago might not really help you now, but it might bring you some context to what could happen, because patterns continue itself. So one of the things that we dive deeply into our trainings is understanding what our patterns are. If you don't understand where you've been, then, or what you usually do in a reactive mode, then you don't have control to change those patterns and to make different decisions for different outcomes, right? So absolutely, I think diverse perspectives bring in a really good advantage, just like curiosity, and just like understanding what questions you're really asking your team, right? And what kind of quality uh, prompts you are bringing to the table to, I don't know, to like really create that mindset of experimentation and innovation. Like you have to be willing to let go of a lot of the things you did in the past, but you also have to be aware of the lessons you learned as well, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just say, well, the past doesn't exist and off we go. And it's that balance, right, of understanding, okay, this is how I usually react. This is what I've done always. Let's explore what's possible if I am aware of what I've done and what I could do, right? And that is the part that training really does for you, and that's give you that space to explore, to experiment, to innovate. And I don't know that there's another way to give yourself a space if you don't give yourself the space. It's not an automatic hand down, it's something you have to work on. And I'm really happy to see there's a lot of companies investing in this, because it truly is an investment. It is not just, oh, I'm going to do this because it looks good or because I'm going to check the box. No. When you're investing in your people and when you're really aware of what's happening in your industry, in the world, and how technology is changing everything, you are investing in future proofing your own company and your own results, not just for tomorrow, but to survive in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that the space, I often like, I mean, having worked in such high pressure environments, for example, the space sometimes for me wasn't physical, it was mental, right? It was between the thought and the action, I needed to create a pause so that my brain could be at peace to make the best possible decision in split seconds, right? And what helped me do that was that understanding of my natural human instinct, because number one, it didn't put me on the defense. There's nothing wrong with me. If I Instincts are good, just sometimes they're there just to keep you alive, not to make you the most successful, right? And so I think that the reason why the leadership training that we're doing is a combination of both that innovation and the requirements of the business imperative, but also it starts with a real understanding and normalizing those and explaining those human instincts so that you can decipher between whether this is something that's working for you or against you. And like, for example, many times, listen, I mean, I often say it's very hard to be a CEO with no ego. You got to have some ego, because you got to stand there, or a leader with a little bit of ego, because you got to stand there and tell a bunch of people to do something. You got to look like you think you believe in it, right? The question is, when is ego working for you and when is it working against you? And truly good leaders are the ones that understand the difference between those two things, right? Just like, for example, you talk about standing in front of a room, you're talking about what are you bringing into the room? What prompts are you bringing into the room? If you're somebody who your entire life, maybe whether culturally or just because of the way you were brought up, thinks that a leader is the one with all the answers, you are now threatening your identity, which is what's going to put the alarms going off in your head. The identity you form that leaders have to have all the answers if you are being asked to walk into a room and ask questions instead. But if you can explain that and understand that the times require a different type of leadership, then you're not saying, oh my God, my identity, and you understand the science behind it. You're not saying, oh my God, my identity is at risk. You're like, no, this is normal. My brain wants to do this. This time, it's great. It's not keeping me safe. It's keeping me alive, but not thriving, right?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like one of the things that probably I enjoy the most in this process and talking to other companies and other industries is it's looking at those aha moments for them, right? To say, oh, okay, like I can think of, like I can see it now, right? And I feel, I don't know, like I feel that that makes it super special because you and I have always talked about this, like our approaches are very different, right? Like the way that we see business, it's not it we see the same vision, but we come from two different perspectives, right? And I think that it's not just complementary. I feel like that is wholesome, and when we have that experience, I mean, how beautiful, right? Like it's like here we are, two BFFs, right? Like just trying to share. Like these are my favorite leadership lessons. This is what I learned, and this is what we both took out from our firsthand experience, which is fresh off the oven, right? And here we are in front of you, ready to share. And
You,
I don't know that we're actually tapping into just theory. We tap into theory. We tap into practical examples. But I also tap into my own coaching business, right? And say, like, hey, if I really need to understand this, like, how do I break it down and how do I actually make some exercises to reflect or to pause? Because it's really easy there to say, like, oh, well, just do this. But how?
right.
That's great advice. But how do we do that, right? So, I guess to bring it all back to where we started, right? The environment that we're in and that kind of levels of anxiety that are bubbling up in different industries is starting to be the general consensus in business, period. It used to be one or two industries. It's everywhere now. And that fatigue that we continue to see, it's real. And it's not going to go away by itself. And AI is not here to solve it. However, AI is here to help, right? And there's strategies to do that. And I feel like us just having this conversation, we're already going to come up with more ways to help because that's what we do.
You know, I think one of the things I love, you hear me say a lot is like, double click, triple click until you get to the root cause, right? It's like seeing yourself from some of the exercises we do during the leadership about really connecting with yourself so you can see yourself with clarity and with no judgment. So, and then the science behind it then allows you to carve the path, the best path forward, right? That's one. The other thing I'll tell you is that where it comes, you know, a lot of when we talked about biases, for example, during this time of DE&I, and you know, that's sort of become like, DE&I has kind of become a bad word, whatever. But what I will tell you is that people who were doing types of bias training were actually unlocking innovation at their companies. And one of the things we talk about is the 3 buckets, which is like the bucket of stuff you know, the bucket of stuff you don't know, you don't know, and the bucket of stuff you don't even know you don't know. When companies start to, and people start thinking like that, they're not just looking at race and relationships, right? The social aspect. They're actually looking at processes. They're also looking at untapped opportunities. They can't help but not see now, oh my God, this is an opportunity for another revenue stream, because they're now, one of the other things we teach is like beginner's mindset, right? Is looking at something you've seen forever with brand new eyes. It's amazing what you'll see that you might unlock that you're like, oh my God, I never even realized that we could just build some entire other revenue stream off of this, or save money off of this, right? So for us, innovation, you know, I know lots of people talk about efficiency. To me, innovation and efficiency go one-on-one. They're together, right? Because it's your way of doing the best possible business, or being the business being the best version of itself. That's one. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, when you talk about, we do come from very different perspectives. And that actually is, to your point, wholesome in the sense that it creates a level of alignment among the business. And by the way, these are not just theories. Like, I think it's really important to say that my business partner here never missed a budget, right? She, with her goals, she achieved them. In news, I was able to, you know, me and my team, obviously, because I'm not a one-man band, but we were number 1, number 2 in a market where percentage-wise, that wouldn't have made sense, okay? But we were in Chicago. And the reason is because it's the thing I talk about, the alignment within an organization, right? We were aligned, Edna. There was a shared purpose, there was a shared language, there was a shared space to innovate, right? And that is really what we're teaching based upon, I mean, what we're teaching, yes, it's theory and some of what we've studied, but it is definitely coupled together with a lot of stuff we did ourselves together, and that provided the business results that many CEOs are looking for their teams to be able to do too.
Yeah. So in conclusion, I think we should be doing more of these
Absolutely.
conversations, and I think that we should be really continuing to explore and never stop learning, right? As much as we are also helping other organizations, a lot of the process is for us to also be vulnerable and, as you always say, radically authentic, right? And say, hey, what is really happening and how do we tackle this? So depending on the industry and depending on who we're talking to, we also have to have the humility to approach it from a learner's point of view and never as an expert. And it creates a much more comprehensive experience for everyone.
Yeah, it means like everybody starts to row in the same direction. Now, I started the Tag Collab, the Substack, because I have loved and always loved leadership for myself, number one, because like I say, my radical authenticity, I say I am a work in progress every single day. But I have fallen in love with the topic, and I see that when we share what we share with other people, it makes a difference. And so it just felt so natural enough for us to come together. One, we made a great team before, so why not make a team again? And two is this shared love for just personal development and business results, and being able to give that back, you know, to the world. My hope, the way we start our executive leadership experiences is that we definitely understand that it is not a one-day thing. What we are hoping is to be infectious enough to make people fall in love with this process. Like they go to the gym, work on yourselves, because when you do that, not only are you becoming the best version of yourself, but the companies that you work for become the best version of themselves too, right? And so we invite you to read more about us on the tagcollab.com. More to come, and we'll have some other announcements coming too, because as Edna mentioned, we do not just believe in creating leadership experiences for people who are already a little tainted like all of us and need the work in progress thing. We also are actively working to have early intervention with young women and men to teach them these same executive leadership skills that we're teaching older people. You don't have to wait to become a high potential. Why not learn them or have your kid learn them from before? So more to come. We'll have a lot of announcements in the next couple of weeks.